Yay! Oh my God, this is so wonderful. Dear listeners out there, I'm sitting down with a dear friend of mine, Miss Toni Jones, Mrs. Toni Jones. And before I read up her beautiful intro, I just want to mention that I've been wanting to see this beautiful woman for a very long time. And not only did it take her writing a book and me starting a podcast for us to finally get together and go, okay, let's make this happen. And so, things happen when they're meant to happen. And without further ado, it is just such an honor and a joy to have you here in the podcast chair today, Toni. I am going to read up your intro. So here I am, thrilled to introduce Mrs. Toni Jones, a journalist, an author now, and a visionary founder of the Shelf Help Club, the world's first personal development book club. After navigating her own path through burnout, Toni dedicated a decade to the world of self-improvement, reading over 1,000 books and interviewing some of the most influential voices in the industry to find what truly resonates. She has distilled that mountain of wisdom in her debut book, You, A Beginner's Guide, which launches this May in partnership with the Pound Project. Toni's mission is refreshingly grounded. She believes we don't need to become someone new, but rather understand who we already are. Through her three-part framework of self-discovery, life design, and life support, she helps a global community of over 25,000 people move from just consuming ideas to actually living them. Toni, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. So this is my first interview about the book. So I have notes everywhere because I'm like timelines and books and also timelines because Josie, like you mentioned, we've known each other for a while. And I was looking back because you actually were such a huge part of the beginning of my self-help journey, shall we say. So you mentioned 10 years, 10 years since I've been immersed in this stuff. That wasn't the plan. It was, as many people find self-help, it was a kind of a moment of desperation that led me to reading the first book. And then, as we'll talk about, I'm sure that book then leads to the next book, leads to the next idea, leads to a yoga class with these beautiful Nordic sisters, leads to a retreat, leads to talking about it. So all these things. And as I just mentioned before we went live, the idea, like looking back over all the books I haven't looked back over all the books I've read, but I've been looking at all the books we've read as a community, which is 64. So mine will be 65 with the club. So looking back at those books over the 10 years and the 8 years of self-help, at the time I was like, I thought I just chose them randomly. And maybe in the moment somebody was talking about it, or I met the author, or I liked the cover, or whatever reason. But actually looking back, I can see a real arc of development of me, of my business, of my understanding of this industry in this space, but ultimately of how I can help people best, which is like you've always just been such a huge expander for me in that area. So this is a very beautiful full circle moment. So thank you for having me.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I'm actually speechless over here on the side. I didn't know this was your absolute first one about the book. So
It is.
I feel so honored, even more honored. Wow, fantastic. And Toni, let's just remember together here. The first time I met you, because I was trying to go back in history on my side of the screen.
Yeah.
And in my head, it was you coming to one of my yin classes at Soho House. Is that right? Is that the first time?
It probably was, yeah.
I
Because so the first date that I have is it's you helping me at my first event for Self Help, which was the first birthday, which was like 2018. So, and then the year after, I went on a retreat with you and Ida in Burgundy in France, and that was like a mind blowing experience for me. So yeah, I think it probably was me probably thinking never doing yoga before. And I remember that. Well, I remember your classes. I remember that you used aromatherapy and music and you affirmations and all this stuff that at the time I was like, what the hell? I just want to like lie down and be still and stop my brain working. But I appreciate it now very much.
absolutely, because I remember you came over and said, like, you introduced yourself to me after one of those classes, and you were like, who is this Louise Hay woman? And you were like, I think you mentioned that you had come across her as well. And, Louise Hay is still one of my biggest, greatest inspirations to this day. A woman who didn't start her own company until really she was in her 50s, and then continued working and continued inspiring, and still to this day is inspiring people all around the world, even though she's, I mean, the word expired is wrong, but she's passed on to next,
Yeah.
but her work is still living on through her. And I seem to recall that it was actually this connection about Louise Hay that you really like, because those are the affirmations that I was using a lot in those classes. But
Yeah.
anyway, somehow the universe made us cross paths in those early days, long time ago. But Toni, before we get into your book, which I am so thrilled about, and honestly, this thing that you've created a community of 25,000 people globally, and again, from a desire that actually started out from wanting to deeply help yourself, and then through that, as a byproduct, ending up helping so many other people. It's just absolutely incredible story, and I can't wait to dive into it. But I want to understand a little bit about you in terms of how you started out in life. And I do this with everyone. I think it's so important that in order to understand who you are today and the work that moves you and lives through you and is created by you, we have to understand how you started out. So if you want to share with us a little bit about where you grew up, what kind of family setup, family system, what kind of belief systems, as much or as little as you want to share, tell us a little bit about early Toni Jones life.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, self-discovery is step one of my process, because I agree. I think it's to work out where you want to go, you have to understand how you got to where you are. And I suppose, yeah, for me, I have now quite a complicated family setup, and it started as a complicated family setup. So maybe I'll test you on this later. But I grew up in the northwest of England, and my dad had two children before they got together. So I was the middle child for my dad, but I was the eldest child of four that he had with my mum. So I feel I don't know if there's a book in here somewhere, but I definitely relate a lot more to being the elder sister, the elder kind of responsible, I suppose, assumed responsibility. I don't know if I had the responsibility when I really look at it, but I think you assume a lot, don't you, as an elder sibling? But then I also have the middle child stuff of not being seen and heard, maybe, and getting enough attention. So growing up there, parents split when I was about 7. My dad was a big drinker and bit of a player, I think we would say these days. He was a bit of a man about town. So my mum moved with the 4 kids to a different part of the country. We moved around quite a bit. And then eventually we settled, and I went to high school in North Wales. And then I had good school. Made some amazing friends, some of whom I'm still really good friends with now. I think I had an easy school. I actually find it easy to make friends, which I appreciate now, and I didn't know then is a superpower. I mean, a lot of people in my community come because they need to make friends, and they want to connect with people. So that's never been a problem for me. So I appreciate that is something that I'm very lucky with. So moved around a lot, made a lot of friends. I think I always had a yearning to get to a big city. I grew up in quite a small town. So I went to University of Manchester, but I was just London, bright lights. This is too small for me. This is I think, like I said, maybe I didn't necessarily behave that well, but I never got caught is what my mum would always say to me. So I was misbehaving a bit at the weekends, doing well at school. So that was all right. I went to university. I got my job in London. I told a little white lie. Well, I told a lie about my exam results for this big job that I'd got. I'd signed a contract to move into a fancy flat, all this kind of stuff. And they asked me to bring my results papers on the first day of work. And when I tell this story, people are shocked, because I don't think anyone's been asked ever. But I told a lie about what I got in my A levels to get this job, and I just thought they would appreciate my tenacity, maybe. But I got fired before I'd even started the job. I nearly got sued by this huge management consultant. So that sent me along a bit of a different path, maybe. And then I was a year out, and then I got a really dull job as a pricing analyst for a telecoms company, which at the time and now it's not me. It wasn't me. I think I'd always wanted to write. I'm always interested in people. I didn't really know that was a job option. And then at this quite dull job, this American new female boss came in and shook up everything by interviewing people one on one and saying, "What do you really want to do? Like, what do you really want to do?" And I said something like, "Senior pricing analyst, obviously." And she said, "That's what you want to do with your life, is it?" Because I think, that's what you're supposed to say to your new boss. And I said to her then, so this is when I was like about 20, 22, with nobody that I knew was in media. I'd written a lot myself, like as a kid, but I'd never kind of shared it with anyone. And I said I'd love to edit a magazine. And I don't even know where that came from. I think it was just like a kind of a deep desire to share people's stories, maybe. And eventually, well, pretty quickly actually, I'd moved to New York, and I lived in New York for a summer. I went to night school at NYU to study journalism, stayed there for a few months, hustled around, got an internship at a few places. And then I came back to London, lived on someone's sofa for a while. And I just said, does anyone know anyone who works in a newspaper or a magazine or anything to do with writing? And somebody knew someone who worked on the Sun newspaper. And that was my kind of entry into media and writing and journalist life. So that was maybe too speedy about the childhood, but I think it's important to kind of talk about, I suppose, how you get from a small town in North Wales, not really thinking, not really consciously planning. A lot of my life, as we will discover, has not had much strategy, but there's always been these kind of pulls to things. And I'm sure you know these as well. There's like pull to the bright lights, pull to writing, pull to certain people. So I ended up working at the Sun for about 10 years and then went from there.
Oh my God, I love it. Let's take a breath.
Okay, sorry. It's like a therapy session, Josie.
No, you're doing amazing, and thank you so much for sharing all of that, because exactly what you just said, what you just self-reflected, which I love. You told your whole story. It was like, let me self-reflect now. Josie, I'll do the thing. So basically, exactly like you said, this thing of like, I think, in general, like I always kind of have a little laugh about life, because I think it's such a joke. We in essence, it's true though. Like, we grow up in a system that says you must always have a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan and a 20-year plan and next life plan. And I'm like, and we die all the time. So I'm not saying to not have a plan or have dreams and not take action or aligned action, but this idea that you're supposed to know what you want to do, in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, is number one, may never happen, a future that may never come, but also you don't know that version of you. You haven't met her yet. So how are you supposed to take the choice away from her? She hasn't been through what you are about to go through and explore. So I think the fact that, you said, oh, I didn't have much of a strategy, and yet you did. Because exactly like you said when you were self-reflecting there, you kept following an inner calling. And I know we can use those words as like, oh, I hustled and I did this and I did that. But it wasn't just left, right, and center. It was still in alignment with something within you calling you forward. And then you opened up. And again, because you said, actually one of your superpowers is that making friends or making new friends comes easily to you, right? So you did that. You opened up to your network and you were like, hey, anyone knows anything about this thing, right? Which again is, an incredible skill to have, but also this is basic human beingness, like asking for help and asking the resources, that are right here with you. Like that's living in abundance. For me, that's a strategy worth using, like speak to your network. And that's what you've been doing, throughout. And the same thing, like no one knows what's around the corner, but we'll never know if we don't dare to at least attempt to go there, right? And so you did. Like every time, like the road will reveal itself as you're walking it. That is truly how you've lived. And obviously, like, I'm excited to hear where you're at now and all of that. But even, so then when I was reading your bio here, and when you had that burnout, and so I'm assuming that you you're at the sun for 10 years and again, life changes and your goal changes and your dreams change because you are changing through that experience, right? And then even hitting a point in your life where you're like, hey, okay, I'm writing, but I might not be writing in the way that I want anymore. Like something.
Mm.
Do you want to take us to that pivoting point, to this moment? And I know it's never just like, oh, it was a Saturday afternoon, Josie, and all of a sudden I was burned out. Of course, it doesn't happen like that. But just in those initial stages or in that moment, maybe just take us back in time to a moment where you just realized, I can't keep going the way I've been going. Does that make sense? Give us one.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I love that idea of you can't make plans based on, or you shouldn't necessarily make plans based on who you are now, because you're so right. Like you're making plans based on such a limited knowledge, isn't it? And you only know what you know, and there's all this other stuff.
And you're actually also something even more important. You're actually also taking choice away from future you.
Yeah, I love that. I'm writing notes, Joe, as we go, by the way.
That's
Uh,
but I
I,
think because especially because with my intuitive healing, and I also do oracle cards now and manifestation talks and stuff, and people are like, so will this thing happen in 6 months? And I'm like, well, with if you continue down the road that you're doing right here right now, I can tell you whether or not that is likely to appear. However, I said, if I was to tell you right now, and I'll be like, yes, this thing is going to happen, but the thing is, you haven't met that version of you in 6 months time. You haven't been through the ups and the downs, the ins and the outs that are going to perhaps change your mind 360 degrees. So then in 6 months I'll pop up in your life and be like, hey, this thing happened like you wanted it to, and you'll be like, no, I don't want it anymore.
mm,
So
yeah.
predicting by predicting to that degree, we're actually taking choice away from ourselves. We are narrowing down to a point where, like you said, because we don't know that version of ourselves yet. For me, that's not growth. That's not living in opportunity. That's actually imprisoning ourselves.
Yeah. So there's something about being in the sweet spot, isn't there, between planning and looking forward and growth,
100%.
and not just being stuck and reacting, which is what I was doing. So when you say there probably wasn't a moment, I do remember there was a specific moment that happened so after the Sun I left, and I went to work for the Mail Online, and I was there for a couple of years as one of the editors on the female pages. So both of these news organizations are infamous because they were the biggest in the world at the time. The Sun was the world's biggest newspaper. I kind of accidentally ended up there, stayed there for 10 years. So I appreciate that I obviously was okay at my job because I stayed there, right? But I did accidentally end up there. The Mail was a very much a strategic move because this thing called the internet was happening. I thought, I probably need to learn about that. And this was the world's biggest website. But at the time, it was still, people were not using the web. We sound like two old grannies now. Well, I sound like an old granny. But at the time, it was still quite new and it was quite exciting. But these papers and these news organizations are infamous for a reason. It's like the turnover of content and the demands and the pressure and the deadlines are huge. And for a daily newspaper, which is what the Sun was, I was just working on the paper at the time. At the end of the day, it's done, right? You've written the piece about Kate Middleton's fringe or whatever it was that day, and you've done the pictures, but it's gone to print. It's physically left the building. So whatever time you're leaving the building, you can feel like tomorrow's a new day. There'll be another load of stories. There's another load of stuff to do. You move to online, and that doesn't happen. So you just have this never ending to-do list. And I never made peace with that. Now that I know the terms for it and the understanding of it, my nervous system was not able to. I mean, I don't know if anybody's nervous system can make peace with that, but there are people there who I hugely respect and who I like as people. Lots of people there who I don't, but I learned a lot. And so I was there as an editor and looking after a desk, and the hours were brutal, like in at the desk at 7 a.m., leaving sometimes at 5, 6, 7 p.m. With not really a break in between. But at the same time, I was doing myself no favors and I was going out all the time because I had access to amazing opportunities because I worked for the world's biggest news organization, and B, I was so miserable in my job. And some people listening might relate to this. And when I say it now, it sounds like nuts. This is not, it's not a way to look after yourself. But at the time, I didn't know anything about looking after myself. I didn't care about looking after myself. I just reacted to life. And through some kind of hustle, some kind of strategy at times, I'd ended up in this place where I thought I wanted to be, where I did want to be. And so I had this career that I'd worked really hard for. So up to, by the end, it was like 15 years working in very difficult news environment. So there also becomes that kind of like, wow, I can hack it here. I can do anything, right? And then you look around and then it starts. Like, I think I did it. You do things when you're new at something. You can do it for a few months, and then you think, is this hard because it's hard, or is it hard because I'm new? And then after a while, I was like, this is just insane. It's not just hard. It's insane. So I'm writing all day, every day, or editing other people's work, not necessarily about subjects that align with my values. At the time, I didn't know what my values were, but I think your body knows when you're not in alignment. Working with people who were super stressed and ill and not their best selves sometimes, which I include myself, and therefore not able to be my best self either with the people I worked for or with the people outside of life. So I'm still with my lovely husband. Like we've been married nearly 19 years. But if we were ever going to not be together, that was the time, because he just got whatever was left after I'd worked too hard, gone out too hard, and then eventually came home. So the fact we're still together is a self-help miracle, I think. God bless him for being such an amazing guy. But there was a point where I think I had shingles. I was getting ill regularly. Getting time off was so difficult. Even holiday that you were like contractually entitled to was difficult. It was just difficult to work there and be churning out, kind of being so productive as well. And I think I talked about a certain conversation that had happened in a conference with like swearing and shouting and things like that. And Dan, my husband, who is if you know anything about attachment theory, he's a very secure person. He's a very secure individual. He's a photographer. He's always worked for himself. So he has clients, but he's never worked in an office environment. He's like, it's not okay for people to speak to people like that. Not you, but anybody. Like, that's not okay that people speak to people like that. And I was like, well, that's just how it is. And I think I knew it was difficult, but I was looking around. I thought, well, these people can all do it, so I need to do it. And I've worked hard to get here. So this is just what life is now. And then he said to me, so the moment is, he said, you can just leave. It was literally like a permission slip, light bulb moment, whatever you want to call it. Because in my head, I was like, that's not an option. I've worked so hard for this. I cannot just leave. And ultimately, it's like, if I hadn't have left, I don't know what would have happened, because I was not well. Like, I could talk about burnout, like mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. Like, physical burnout is one thing, right? So getting ill and your immune system depleting and not sleeping properly or eating properly or doing all those things. But I think the mental and emotional burnout that comes from not taking care of yourself and not living in alignment and not being proud of what you're doing, and also getting to the point of, like, I was the point of self-sabotaging. And so there's not looking after yourself, and then there's blowing your life up, because subconsciously, I think the body and the mind is like, something needs to change here. And for some of us, we get to a point, don't we, of that burnout and that complete breakdown of the body or the brain or the mind.
100%. Wow, what a story, Toni. Oh my God. And it's no, but it's that thing, because it's like, when we're in it, you can't see the trees in the forest of, one of those ones, right? It's so true, because it becomes normal, and because everyone else that we are surrounding ourselves with, for them, well, they're also sick and they're also doing this.
Yeah.
Coping, and then you're in this like downward spiral where you're kind of beating yourself up at not being able to cope, or the minute your little heart goes, oh, maybe there's another way, you're immediately shutting yourself down, right? And so you needed someone to be an obviously it was wonderful with your husband, but you really needed someone who was an outsider, and inside
Yeah.
enough that he understood you and he understood your world, but an outsider enough that he wasn't part of it like that. So he could give you that, and not even a permission, but an option, just like
Yeah.
but there's that thing also, not only because you're that, you had fought so hard, not just to get the job, but to keep the job. And it's this,
Yeah.
I really love the saying, this, the saying that, you know, you are allowed to change your life in a single decision. You are allowed to walk away from anything and anyone in a single decision, even if at one point that thing or that person saved you.
Mm.
And I think it's so juicy because it's like it's ambition is also usually, I'm not saying that ambition isn't always just coming from a beautiful, amazing place of wanting to do good and express ourselves fully and all of that, but very often ambition is, usually it also comes from a lot of pain. And so then
Yeah.
that getting that job or getting that relationship or getting that house or whatever it is we dream of, quite often it's kind of like it's a savior. It gives us a little bit of a plaster on the wound. That's not to say we shouldn't be ambitious or not, look after our dreams and breathe life into it. But it does mean that sometimes we can really find ourselves in those situations where we were like, but this has kept me alive. And not only does it look good on paper and all of that, but it's, there's always a reason for why we stay in something, even if that something
Yeah.
ends up being, not kind of greatly toxic. So anyway, here we are. And at this moment, because this is another thing, Dan could have said it like 6 months prior, 2 years prior. You heard it when you were ready to hear it, right?
Yeah.
So here you are, and you're going, something within you is clicking. Thank God he said those words. He's probably said them before, but this day you were like,
Yeah.
you've got the beans.
Yeah.
Right? And so then what happens? You go in.
So then I kind of leave. I had my notice in. I'm still doing shifts because it's like breaking the cord gently. But I've got to tell you this just about ambition, Josie, because you'll love this. So because I want people to know that you can be ambitious. It doesn't mean that you have to be. Ambition looks different for different people, sorry, should I say. So I think when I was working in the newspaper and I looked around the newsroom and I'm looking at my boss and my boss's boss, which is like the next step. Ambition used to me previously was like, that's the ladder, that's what you want. And at the same time as Dan saying that and talking about you can just leave, there's part of me that's like, do I want that person's life? No. They're divorced, they never see their kids, they've been to rehab, like, all because of this job, well, and their own choices. But it's like, actually, can I be ambitious? And then when I had my leaving party, but when I decided to leave, because what actually happened next is it got worse, because I then left this career, a 15-year career and an identity as a journalist for the world's biggest newspaper, the world's biggest website, whatever it was. So I was voluntarily leaving that, so the people around me, and anyone will know this if they've left a corporation maybe, or any kind of team where everyone treats you as though you're mad, because you have to be, because otherwise what are they still doing there, right? So it's people come and say goodbye and there's a leaving party, and one of the senior editors said to me, it's just a shame you're not more ambitious. And at the time that landed, I can even feel sick. I just feel sick even thinking about it now, even though I've reframed it to death, and I know I am ambitious, but I'm ambitious for very different things now. But at the time when I'm like, what am I doing? What's next? I haven't got any clue. So for someone that you kind of respect and admire to hit you exactly where it hurts, not on purpose, just on that's what he actually thought. So I just thought I'd share that story, because me then felt crushed about the idea that somebody wouldn't think I was ambitious, and obviously I wasn't, because look what I was doing. Me now, it's like, yes, I am ambitious, but for a different life. So I just thought I'd share that.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I mean, I'm so sorry you had that experience, but and also bless him, because like you said, I'm sure he didn't mean to, he used the words that he knew how to use, right? But wow, ouch. And especially that thing of like, you're there and you're going, and again, you are allowed to change your life around any time, any place, even if it was once your greatest dream. That doesn't mean not
Mm.
being ambitious. It means being ambitious for the new you that is being born, right? So it's that thing of, like you said, like looking around and going, well, who can I reflect myself? Who can I see myself in? And do I want that life for myself? And actually, for me, ambitions, and I mean, obviously it's the same for you, would be actually, I would quite like to be healthy and I would like to be happy and I would love to create an everyday that I don't have to escape.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. And I'd love to see my friends, and I'd love to like try some different things and not be scared every day I go into work.
Right, 100%. Oh,
Mm.
so a deep share. Wow. So then what happens? This must have been around the time when you and I met then. So did you
Yeah.
had you just left when you came to, like, when we and I bumped into each other in my classes and yoga and all of that, something around that?
Yeah. So I'm just looking at I did a little timeline. So I think, so, so I go from like being in a newsroom and being super busy all the time. And like I mentioned earlier, like I'm used to being surrounded by people always, like my whole life, like friends, family, work. I've never spent any time by myself. I had never spent any time by myself. And then suddenly, like we were talking about, it's you're allowed to change. You're allowed to make a change. But I think we don't always know what the change is going to look like. So being unsure, like for me, I did get pushed. It was like I cannot stay here, or I cannot stay in this version of me. So it was partly to do with the job, partly to do with going out drinking, partly to do with not looking after myself. All of these things it was like the perfect storm of something needs to change. So I mean, that's desperation, isn't it? And it's not really something I'm proud of. And what I try and do with all the work I do is help people not get to that point of something needs to change. But for me, who had never read a self-help book in my life, I got to this point where I was now sitting in our spare bedroom by myself, writing, trying to be a freelancer, pitching ideas. But my identity, my self-worth has always been pretty low, and that's probably why I chose a job where I needed validation from things like that. Probably why I used to drink so much. But I was suddenly there, and it was just me. I didn't have a big name title behind me. I talk about the first few networking events I went to, and you just have your name tag, and it's like freelance, and the way that people look through you. And I know now it's like those are not the kind of people I want to hang out with. But again, when you're unsure of what's happening next, when before you had such a solid identity as this person. So then I think my identity became the going out person and the party girl. So it's like, yeah, fine, I haven't got a job, but guess what? That's just more time to go out and be fun and be wild. This does not end well. I'm sure you know that. So yeah, so one day I'm kind of wandering around Chiswick where I lived, and I go into the Oxfam bookshop just because I'm literally just losing my mind of just sitting there by myself. And this book fell in front of me. It literally did, and people sometimes don't believe that. But I'm going to show you a copy here, and it's called that's the post-it telling you what number it is. Change Your Life in 7 Days by Paul McKenna. And it's not the most profound of self-help books, but this book, 10 years later, has definitely changed my life. But that was the book that I started reading. And so just as we were meeting, I think I'd started reading this book, and it blew my mind. And it took me a year to read a book about changing your life in 7 days. And I'm still acting on the stuff I learned in it. But I think it's because, like as you touched on earlier, the right book at the right time, the right question at the right time. A lot of my work actually is about the right question at the right time, because what I always bring it back to is the first question in that book is one I couldn't answer, and that's why it had such an impact on me. And the question is, if you wake up tomorrow in your dream life, what does it look like? And it's supposed to be a nice question. It's like a juicy question. You'd love it. It's like, now I love it. It's like, what could you imagine? Who are you with? What can you smell? All this stuff. What are you wearing? Lovely visualization, dream setting, goal planning things. And I didn't have an answer. I just didn't know that people thought about things like that. I just spent so long reacting and then surviving, I think, that the idea of, I don't know, being able to picture anything, as we touched on earlier, different than what was my day to day, getting through the day. And so the fact I didn't have an answer was actually the catalyst for then, well, I better start learning. and I better work this out. And the Change Your Life in 7 Days format that Paul McKenna shares is every day you're doing a different exercise. And so it introduced me to these concepts, which now have become such a big part of my life and what I read and what I teach. And it's things that would be, for people who are listening, they probably know this stuff, but at the time, the idea that you are not your thoughts, for instance, that you don't have to act on everything you think, to me was just like, and every single thing that I learned like that, or, the inner critic, whose voice is that? Well, oh no, it's not my voice. Well, whose is it? Where's it come from? All these, they are big concepts, but really they're just things that I'd never thought about before. And I wondered why I hadn't thought about them before. And then as I was reading and learning more, and then starting to go into yoga and meet people like you, I got marched to therapy by my husband. So that had happened as well, which is also not the way to go to therapy, as people know, I'm sure, but it happened.
Listen, you know what? All routes leads to Rome, right? So potato, sending all the love to Dan the man. I love that. Bless you.
Yeah, so all this was happening, and then I started reading more and more books, and then I just thought, hang on, why does everyone know this? And not everyone does know this. More people than I realized do, but why don't we know all this stuff? And then I needed to start talking about it to people. And Dan and my friends at the time were like, we love that this is helping you. That's great for you. But when you stop talking to us about Paul McKenna and feel the fear and do it anyway, like, they weren't really that interested. They've since changed their tune a little bit. But at the time, it was very much like, this is like 10 years ago. Yeah, this is like 9-10 years ago, and I was getting super nerdy and into this stuff, for which I make no apologies. I mean, it's literally changed my life, and I now love to share advice based on all this stuff with all my friends and Dan. But I think the Self-Help Club came, I think you said earlier about I wanted something to change, but I don't think I did want it. I just needed it, right? So I needed to leave that job. I needed to find other people that were into this stuff and could support me. I didn't know at the time. I needed to find other people who were not the kind of people that I'd been going to work and sitting next to every day. And they talk about, if you talk about that you are the 5 people you spend the most time with, like my life, this could not be more different now. And that's the story of how self-help came about. And then since we've gone on to read a lot of books together in the community, and I've read a lot more by myself.
Absolutely love it, Tony. And I think there's also this thing that, like, life happens through contrast, right? Through contrast, we get a little bit closer to who we are and what we want. Like, but it happens through contrast. Like, it also happens through alignment and through, oh, I want more of this. But very often in life, we need to understand what we don't want in order to get a little bit closer to what we do want. And then again, what used to be your want, i.e., you want to write, you're now a writer, which is amazing, and you've been writing for many years, but like, part of you used to dream, oh, maybe the Sun or maybe the Daily Mail, and then you got there, right? And you're like, and then through that experience, you realize, actually, this is no longer fulfilling that dream, right? So then you realize that, and then you were like, well, I don't really know where I want to go, but I know it's not here. Mm-hmm. I think this is life for everyone. And this is, again, the things that we don't talk about in life. Like, in order to know where you want to go next, like I'm talking about in the next hour, tomorrow, potentially next month, maybe next year, but we'll have to know where we don't want to go. Because the question where you said, you were like, oh, we do this visualization of like your favorite day in your life, or, if you wake up tomorrow and anything is possible, what would you do? Right. And you're like, this question gives me anxiety. Right.
Yeah.
Well, even through that experience, you realize that you want to know. You want to be the person that goes, not because it looks a certain way, but because it feels good to know yourself, this version of you, on such a deep level. Right. And this is a question that, honestly, Toni, like, almost no one asks themselves. Like, we ask ourselves, again, when we're going through big, pivotal, transformational, let's call it really shitty and crazy, overwhelming moments in life. Then we ask ourselves, oh, who am I?
Yeah.
most, and also it's not how we're taught, right? By society, we're taught to look outside of ourselves. Look into the eyes of your partner. This is who you are. Or look at the school you're at. This is who you are. Or the job you get offered. Or the money in your bank. Like, this is who you are. There's a nice quote by Carl Jung, and he says something along the lines of, the world will ask you who you are. And if you do not know, it will
Mm.
tell you.
Yeah.
It's brutal, but so true. So I think this point where you're like, oh my God, I realized I couldn't answer that question that he posed, Paul McKenna, in the first book, right?
Yeah.
It is literally the most essential, but also the most difficult question to answer. It's a lifetime journey, if not many lifetimes.
Yeah, sure. And I think, and sometimes we don't want to we don't want to go there because that is as well. There's a reason that you might not be able to picture a positive future. And why is that? And so it's not just because you don't know how often. Well, I would, yeah, assume it's not because you don't know how, because you can learn, we can learn techniques, right? We can learn strategies. You can read all the books, but ultimately it's about what these books will ask of you, and what this work asks of you is to go back and work out why you're in this, why you've got to this position. So, like as I said earlier, the idea of hopefully you don't need to be in a desperate state or making yourself ill or burnt out to learn these techniques. And so what I teach now, and what you do as well, I think it's that management, isn't it? Like maintenance, but rather than get to a point of crash and burn and then like SOS, I just need anything. So obviously people will come to self-development and personal development at that moment, but I think if we can help people along the way not to get quite that far down the down the dark night of the soul, maybe.
100% Tony, and I think this is an amazing point to share with us. Tell us about your book. So I'm sure your book has,
Mm.
as again, because it's I always say, like, we've rehearsed our entire lifetime for the person we are now. Like, so this book is not only your 10 years of reading 1,000 books, or whatever it is. I mean, this is your whole life. Everything that you've experienced, all the good stuff, all the bad stuff, like all of that. And then the 1,000 books, and then everything else that came from that. But share with us. So the book, as much as or as little as you want to share as always, but also I just want to share, I really love how you've got this whole past self, future self, present self, because sorry, I will stop talking because I really want to hear from your, in your words, about your book. But I personally, when you send it across to me, Tony, I love the fact that you have this 3-step self-development method, because we are always in relationship with future self and with past version of self. Like, so we may as well open up that conversation instead of pretending it's not going to happen, because and again, in the whole sort of, mindfulness community, develop self-development, self-help community, like it's we always just go, oh, just be really present, forget about future you or past you. Well, that's just not possible. So can we, instead of forgetting about them,
Yeah.
invite them to the table? So talk us through it. What is your new book, your beautiful book, about?
Yeah, invite them to the table and see what they want or what they need, right? So I think trying to distill what I've learned into a book has been, and it's quite a small book as well. It's a pocket-sized guide to self-help. So because one of my big values with self-development generally and with self-help is making it accessible and easy and non-scary and entry level. So I feel like this is very much what I'm here to do. So read a shit ton of books, sorry for swearing, worked with thousands of different readers and interviewed hundreds of experts now, including Paul McKenna twice, and I'm interviewing him one more time this week. So that that is like still blows my mind and makes me very happy. But distilling all of that into what people need is really difficult, because we all need different things. But what I have realized over the years is that there are very much patterns, and there are key areas to focus on. So I love the method I created. I'm calling the connected self method, and the idea of connecting with those versions of yourselves, past, present, and future. So a bit like Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. So if you think about the three ghosts, what would, it doesn't have to be Christmas, but like if you did go into your past and looked back, you would see some of what has shaped you. If you do go into your future, and I share three big questions in the book, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the original title of the book was going to be "Who Are You Becoming?" Because for me, that's what I care about more than anything. Is the idea, is sharing the idea that you can change that. Right. So if nothing changes, nothing changes. Where would you be in a year's time, in 5 years' time? Where would I be if I hadn't have left the Daily Mail? If I hadn't have fixed things with my friends and my husband and all that stuff? And kind of looking forward is so valuable, because then you have, that's data, right? That's information. And then you have the power to make changes, which you do in your present, which you're doing with your present self, which you can. And there's lots of different, I think most of the books we read and most of the tools we talk about in self-help are probably about in the present, because they're things that we can do now. So whether that's habits, routines, rituals, how we run our mornings, which I know you love, or how we run our days. So the idea of 3 stages of self-discovery, which is what we've just gone through, then life design, looking forward, and then life support. So what do you need right now? So the 3 questions that I ask in the book. Well, I ask the first question from Paul McKenna, and I wonder if people can answer it. And as you said, probably lots of people would not be able to answer that question, or would need a bit of time. And then going through, so for self-discovery is what has shaped you, is the question. For life design is who are you becoming? And then for life support is what do you need right now? So what do you need to get you there? And I think the questions are almost as important as the books. Like I said, like I touched on earlier, we can read all the books and we can get all the information. And I am very much in my head as a writer, as a journalist, as someone who reads and consumes, and now more than ever, just consuming. And I wish that reading a book could change everything, but maybe I don't, because it doesn't. Is the plot spoiler there? But it's like reading the book can be the start, and then asking yourselves these questions and digging into what the book has brought up for you is the next stage, I suppose. So what my book is taking people through these 3 steps, using insights from different people that I've interviewed or different books that I've loved. So in the first section, I start with self-compassion, and I start because I just feel like before you do anything in life, you need self-compassion. And a lot of people that I work with, and me as well at the time when I first started on this self-development journey, I didn't love myself. I didn't even like myself. So the idea of telling people to do that, I've come to learn, is quite difficult. But self-compassion is something that we can start doing whether we like ourselves or not. So the book starts there, and then we go into different tools and techniques and advice from my favorite authors, but I also share stories of my own. And so each of the steps starts with a personal story. And I find this has been so hard for me, Josie, because I'm used to interviewing people, and it's easy. Well, I find it easy to say, Paul McKenna says you should do this. Let's talk about it, because that's Paul McKenna saying it, right? And he's an expert and he knows. For Toni to share a story about when she was a kid, or when she worked here, or about her drinking or whatever it is, it's like, that's my story, and here's my advice on how I fixed it and what I think you should do. And I think that whole visibility bit, and that is what's taken 10 years literally of me needing to read self-help, needing to find other people that read self-help, realizing the impact that reading in community has, because it's huge. So the book club took off by itself. So pre-lockdown, there was book clubs popping up all over the world. And that wasn't anything to do with me. And like I said, strategy is because these challenges and issues and topics are universal. And when I started seeing the impact that it was having, and bringing people together in a room to talk about these things, and you helped me do that at various events and occasions. So we kind of have the body stuff, and then we'd have the mind stuff, but the people coming together, and this, and your clients will know this, being in community with others, there's just something magic about it. So being able to read this stuff and not feel alone is huge. huge for me, and I was seeing it impacting other people. So then I just felt this responsibility, I suppose. It's like, I need to make this something, like, and also it was happening whether I wanted it to or not. People were finding shelf help. Not advertising. I'm not like I'm not an Instagram. I wasn't an Instagram superstar, but people were finding shelf help and saying, I want to share this with my friends. So my challenge since has been leveling up myself as a way to level up this community and now business. So all of the other stuff that came before was challenging, but this has been the toughest, I think. So getting to that point of, and the book kind of looks at that as a way of, so the book is really kind of my journey and as a way to guide people through these 3 steps. So being more visible, showing how I have done things is a huge challenge for me, but I also feel like it's very telling of the work works, right?
100%. And there's also the thing is like, Tony, like, I don't think we're on this, going back to who are you, who are we, and also why are we? Like, why are we here? Like, the most philosophical, but also for me, the most important question you can ever ask yourself. And how can you not ask yourself that? And so the point is, personally, I don't believe we come to this planet to be perfect human beings. Perfect meaning, oh, I have it all worked out. And actually, I don't feel like an imposter at all. And I don't ever have self-doubt. I mean, I am full of self-doubt, full of all of that. But if I want it enough, I do it anyway. It feels like, and not just want it in terms of like, oh, that's going to be cool, but in terms of if I really feel like, actually, it's always been like that. Like for me, personal story, it's just this thing for me, like the way that I personally get moved through this is for me, it's like what I do is like, there's a much bigger reason for it. It's not about me. It's about we. Exactly the same thing as you. It's like, oh, I have to level up, even if it's uncomfortable, because I do this for my community. And then I do, that has a rippling effect, right? So the fact that you share about this so openly here is like, that's the most empowering thing about our whole interview today, is like you sharing, going, oh my God. At various places and spaces in my life have I had this feeling, and literally feeling like the image I had was like, when you're like that thing of walking out on your old identity, and not only the grief that it brings, but the confusion and feeling of almost just walking, when it's really foggy and you can't see where you're walking, but you keep having to like continue walking, you're hoping that you're going to somehow get out on the other side, right?
Yeah.
That is the most human experience that no one talks about. And whether listeners out there, whether you are in a space of, pivoting, transformation, go through that, whether it's a dark night of the soul or it's just really foggy, whether you chose to go through it voluntarily or whether you were pushed because, like you said, Toni, you were like, well, there was no way I could continue being there, that you were getting sick, etc. But whatever it is, it's that thing of, that is the most human state to be in the vast unknown, and we don't, it's so taboo, it's so entangled with guilt and shame, and if I share this part of myself, will people still like me, and sense of like shift of identity happens to all of us. It happens when we lose people we love. It happens then again, when we choose to walk out on a career or we change career, whatever it is, but it's still a shift of identity where we are no longer who we used to be, and we don't know who we want to be going forward. We just know where we don't want to be. And there's grief and there's so much in there. So anyway, I could talk about this all day. What I wanted to ask you, because this I just love so much, and I know I said it before, what made you decide to have these 3 steps, this, the fact that we are always in conversation with future and past, and of course, present self? What was, because I'm sure when you were thinking about this book, and again, books is always a lifetime in the making, or even if you didn't consciously think, oh, I'm going to write this book, but do you remember when it started to solidify for you, I wanted to have these 3, past, present, and future together? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, I think because it's 10 years, I realized it was 10 years at the beginning of the year. I think, you're going through some pictures and I'm like, God, there's a picture of me on a hammock in Thailand looking like death, reading Paul McKenna 10 years ago. Like I was like the skinniest I'd ever been, but I just did not look well because this was like the height of the car crash. And I think and then I've started thinking, what? So it's 10 years I've been reading this stuff,
Clinging.
thinking, yeah, great, but like, what have I actually learned? And then, and when I tell people what I do, I've definitely felt a shift that recently I've moved from like almost being apologetic about it, or like, oh, you wouldn't get it, to like, I really feel now, like I talked about that visibility point, like I really feel that I've learned some stuff, and I've worked with so many people now that I kind of can see what works. I can see in my community on our like weekly Zooms, I can see I have coaching clients now. I can see when I interview authors that we're at a level talking about things. And I started thinking about, how do I make sense of this? And I think there's a real paradox of self-development, isn't there? Where it's like, be grateful for what you have, accept where you are. That's a key lesson. But also want more for yourself, have enough self-worth that you believe you deserve great things. And they kind of feel like, lots of people might think that they're in competition, or they contradict each other. But I feel like both of those things are really important. And the idea of connecting with those three parts of ourselves is like, give your past self compassion, give your future self permission. And the way to do that is looking at what you're doing right now. So I think, and I think 3 steps is just simple. And I want people to know that it's not easy, but it's simple. This stuff is simple. And a lot of it is unlearning. And a lot of it is things that you would be able to tell a friend, or things that you would try and teach your kids. So it's teaching ourselves that, isn't it? And trying to take that on board, and knowing it's simple but not easy. So this kind of work does ask of you, but the other side of it is probably a life that you will love a lot more.
Oh my God, I love that so much. And I also think, like, I mean, the most profound shift, changes, healing are simple. Like
Mm.
it's not complicated. Truth is simple. Love, of course, the experience of love can feel complicated, but at the end of the day, like in the end of the day, we choose to stay with someone because we love them. And if we choose to leave, then the love has shifted and changed, and that's also okay. But usually things, like the most profound things, are actually simple. I think we just overcomplicate it in our mind, right? We're like, oh, I got myself into such a complicated situation, so the answer has to be complicated too. That's
Yeah.
ego math. And then actually, usually, like it's those moments where, like, again, where your husband was like, you can leave.
Mm.
Simple. Like not easy to do, and you had to be in the right headspace, and you also had to have had enough shitty experiences to finally go, actually I want something else. But it's that thing of like, it's always that thing. I remember, I like so many times in my own life, when I found something and I was struggling and struggling, and I felt like I was like trying to push against the current, and all,
Yeah.
and then, like I remember asking myself, I was like, why am I doing this? And I was like, oh, but I can't do it, and I'll just, I'll
Mm.
try harder. And then all of a sudden I came to this really, like, again, like the profound moment was so simple. And the simple moment was just going, I could do it. I can do it. I am doing it. I don't want to do it.
Mm. That's huge though.
Oh, you got goosebumps, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's exactly that same thing for you, right? You could do it. You have proven to yourself and the world or whatever for several years. Yes, I can do it. But you personally have to reach that point within yourself where you go, I don't want to do it. And really,
Yeah.
and even if you don't know what it is I want to do, or who it is I want to be, I at least I know that I don't want that for myself. And
Mm.
even regardless of what other people may think, or the prestige that may come with it or whatever, like when that's no longer exciting, when the only thing that excites you is to go, I just actually want to feel good. And I don't even know what
Yeah.
make me feel good, but like I just want to be able to close my eyes and like what I feel.
Yeah. And the only way to do that is to get to know yourself, isn't it? That's why the book is called You, like a beginner's guide, because it is, but very much like, it all comes down to that. And it's from a selfish point of view. It's very much, what do you know about yourself? What do you understand about yourself? What do you wish was different, or what isn't serving you? And fine, that's data, that's information, and let's use that.
100%. And Tony, I just because I really want to showcase you, highlight you, is best that I can. So to my community, who anyone who's listening out there or watching the YouTube later, Toni, what are some questions people could start asking themselves? So, if people are brand new to this kind of thing and they're like, I've watched this interview, Toni sounds amazing, they can see yourself, they can see themselves in your journey. And they're like, I want to get the book, but right now I know it's not out just yet. It will come out soon. What are some questions people like? What is a question someone could start with? Does that make sense? Like, just yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's do who are you becoming? Because I feel like that's a huge question, but it's easy ways to think about it, right? So and you'll love this. I got the inspiration for this from Peloton. From one of those super peppy motivational riders. And she's like, you got up for this, you're here, who are you becoming? And I was like, I'm becoming someone that goes on Peloton when I don't even want to. I'm becoming someone that quotes like motivational things. But the idea of like, who are you becoming? And this is one of those like mindset shifts. When you have those things where someone might say, no one cares about me, or you could say, no one cares. And it's like there's two different ways of looking at something, right? So who are you becoming can be, it might, the answer to that question might not feel super positive if you're in a place like I was. But there's so much possibility in that, right? And so that's why I love this question, because the idea is who are you becoming can change, as you said, it can change in an instant if you decide it. Whereas what has shaped you has been, and it's important information. But who are you becoming is like it gives you back the power, and it gives you back the agency that I think when we're struggling, we feel like we don't have that. So there's something I talk about a little bit in the book, which is that idea of it wasn't your fault, but it is your responsibility. So whatever's happened to you has happened to you. There's different ways to acknowledge that, heal from that, have compassion for that. But what do you want to do next? And so, yeah, who are you becoming, people? And then maybe the next question for that is, and does that make you happy? Like, because maybe you're becoming a parent, maybe you're becoming maybe you have got this new job, maybe you're becoming someone who renovates houses and you're on your way. Great. It's good to, we don't always need to be miserable to read self-help. This is all like I said earlier, like maintenance management. And I love the idea that this kind of stuff can support us, right? So it can support who we're becoming. That's what, like, these books are a tool.
100%, but also for growth. So like,
Yeah.
not even just to maintain where we are, but to grow. It can be a springboard, right? I think, and this is exactly it. It's the same thing with, any kind of wellness industry, or, also, obviously, like, I'm an energy healer, and I'm always like, you don't have to come and see me when you are literally like one step away from death.
Yeah.
Like, because it's that thing we again, especially like living in a really fast paced city, it's like health, I always say like our greatest wealth is our radiant health. And of course that's health of like emotions as well as mind, as well as body, like, because without those things, we really have nothing. Like, you can't enjoy anything if those things aren't there for you, right? And so exactly like you said, it's there not only, like self-help and self-help, and your new book is there for all of us. Yes, when you're going through the darkest night, but also when you just want to, maintain, but also when you want to expand.
Yeah.
Because when you reach that point where you're like, okay, well, actually, again, I'm good, but maybe you're noticing you feel like you're not growing, so there's a sense of dissatisfaction, which doesn't mean you are like greedy or not grateful for what's happening in your life, all the good stuff that's already there. It just means that you're ready for the next chapter, the new experience, right? So that's definitely a reason as well for people to engage with you. Toni, where can people find you? How can people find your amazing book, and how can they connect with you?
Well, the book is printed by the Pound Project, so it will be available on the Pound Project website for 3 weeks. It's a limited edition, and then my website is shelfhelp.club. So all the information on joining our community. There'll soon be a great little quiz there, which is based on my framework for looking at your kind of overall well-being. So you can look at exactly what you talked about, Josie, like which areas to focus on next. So because there's always something we could be looking at, right? And yeah, so shelfhelp.club is the website, and I host my community on Substack. So but if you head to the website, then you can get everything on there.
Amazing. I absolutely love it. Tony, I'm just realizing I've absolutely taken too much of your time. I said an hour and here we are, 10 past 4. I could talk to you all day. Is there anything else that you would like listeners out there to hear? You've already given us so much incredible food for thoughts and, your incredible life story. There is a question I always ask people, and I feel like you've already answered it, but just in case, and with all your
Mhm.
I feel, you know what? I have to ask you because with your 1,000 books of reading and your whole lifetime, of being an amazing human being, always curious, always, trying to see the next thing and ponder and wonder, I really would love to hear your words about this. So, with everything you've been through in your life, Tony, with all of the
Mhm.
opportunities you said yes to, and the opportunities you either walked away from yourself or did was somehow shifted, and wherever life took you, the people you met, the people you departed with, like all of it, with all the wisdom that you sit in today, if you had just one or two soul messages for humanity, what would it be?
Mm. That's a big question.
But remember, we only get what we're ready for.
Mm. I'm going to use a quote that I use in the book, actually. It's very short, and it is pain pushes until vision pulls. And it's by Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith. And the idea that quite often that short quote to me encapsulates the idea that we spend most of our life fighting against internal stories and beliefs and running on programs that aren't really ours. And the only way to stop doing that is to create a vision for your life that will pull you because it's hard. So it took me a while to get there, but I do have a vision now for what I want my life to look like. Not exactly, but it's more what I want to feel like, right? So I have a vision for how I want to feel. I have a vision for what I want to share, who I want to impact. And so now very much I am able to be pulled by that versus just pushing and fighting and using all my energy to fight the pain of what has been before. So hopefully that's helpful.
I absolutely love that. It's that thing of like, are we spending our whole life running away from something or
Yeah.
going towards something?
You said it a lot more succinctly than me. Yes.
I love your quote. Your quote was perfect. Absolutely. And it goes back to that whole thing of the Paul McKenney, like if you woke up on that perfect day, what would it look like? Like, you know, when we can create a life where we actually start to sort of allow ourselves to daydream and not be anxious about not knowing our perfect daydream, but to go, oh, okay, and it can be really small, right? It can be that thing of like, all I know is that today I like orange flowers, so I will enjoy my orange flowers. Like, not make it something it doesn't have to be. Like, start really
Mm,
small, right? Like, at least that's my own thing. Start super small. Like, if there's just
yeah.
one thing that's pulling you forward. So, for instance, I really love you, Tony. I love your energy. And so for me, it was like, of course I want to spend time with Tony. That might be a small thing, but that has a rippling effect on everything in my life that day, because that means there's one thing that's already going, this is going to be nice.
Mm,
Like, start with the little things. Like, what are you running
mhm,
towards? Just the small things. I want orange flowers. I want to speak to Tony. Make life easy.
yeah. Love it.
Anyway, Tony, my love, it's been such a joy. I will put all of the amazing links and everything else in the not the snow, but the show notes. And please stay on the line for a few seconds just to say goodbye. And listeners out there, thank you so much. We hope you have an amazing afternoon, and we hope that today was inspirational. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.